If you're watching this, you probably want to become more intelligent. And in order to begin to do that, it helps to know what intelligence is. I define intelligence as two things: curiosity and creativity, where every form of intelligence can be categorized as one or both of those traits. Curiosity allows us to learn new things, and creativity allows us to apply what we've learned. Every one of us naturally leans towards one or the other, kind of like being right or left-handed. If we want to improve our minds to become intellectually ambidextrous, we need to work on improving the side that comes less naturally to us. Do you know which type you are? If not, here's a simple question to help you figure it out. Which assignment would be easier for you to do? Reading about a subject you don't know a lot about, or writing about a subject you do know a lot about? If you picked reading, your mind favors curiosity. If you picked writing, your mind favors creativity. If you're a creative person, I recommend going back and checking out my series on curiosity, starting with How to Learn That You Know Nothing. This video here will be for curious people who want to become more creative. So, if that's you, buckle your seatbelt, because today we're going to be learning about the complex you probably have that's stifling your creativity, how and why you developed it, why it keeps your brain from working the way it should, and finally, what you can do to overcome it. Hi, I'm Mayhem, musician, philosopher, cult leader, human, and you're watching my series, Neurohacking. Act 1. The Inner Critic. You may have noticed that children are naturally creative, and over time, some people stay creative while others seem to lose it. But it isn't really that we lose our creativity. Rather, we develop complexes on top that stifle it. Kind of like how on cloudy days, the sun is still there in the sky, but hidden from our view. In order to uncover our natural creativity that we still have, we need to part the clouds obscuring it by becoming aware of these complexes and developing tactics to overcome them. The complex we're going to focus on today is one I call the inner critic. But what is it, and why do some people have it when others don't? It depends to a great degree how much they were encouraged or criticized by people in their early life. As I said, in childhood, everyone is drawn to different types of creative expression. Talking, writing, painting, coloring, dance, singing, instruments, anything you can use to express yourself. And as children, we pay very close attention to the reactions people around us have to this creative expression. It may be very positive and encouraging, or it may be very critical and negative, even shaming. We all experience some of both of these reactions from others, but over time, a pattern seems to emerge. When we express ourselves, we learn to expect either encouragement or criticism. As a way to help us adapt to the situation we find ourselves in, we begin to develop inner complexes that mirror the patterns we experience in the outer world. If we have outer encouragement, we develop an inner cheerleader, encouraging us to make more and more because it is valued by others when we do. If we face outer criticism, however, we begin to develop an inner critic who stifles what we make while it's still an idea, so that we won't have to face the pain of being rejected by others when we make it. Act 2. The neuroscience part. What I just presented is a psychological explanation of how creativity is interrupted during development. We develop an ego complex of an inner critic that halts our creative process. This model of psychology is referred to as parts work, the idea that our personality is a constellation of different complexes which must be worked with individually, and it is a prominent part of Jungian psychoanalysis, a subset of psychology informed by the work of Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung. But if talking to the voices in your head is still too woo-woo for you, you might be interested in the neuroscience that backs it up. This article from the May 2017 edition of National Geographic magazine examines the many factors of genius, including creativity. Dr. Charles Lim of UC San Francisco designed a study to analyze the brains of jazz pianists with an MRI scanner while they were composing music. Compared to a control where the musicians were doing routine practice, such as playing scales, Dr. Lim said that MRI scans showed fundamentally different brain activity, while the musicians were being creative and improvising. So, what differences emerged? Not surprisingly, there was increased activity in the medial prefrontal cortex, an area of the brain associated with self-expression, but there was also noticeably decreased activity in the lateral prefrontal cortex, the area associated with self-control, self-monitoring, and self-censoring. In other words, what we've been calling the inner critic. And that's exactly the words our scientists used. Says Dr. Lim, it's almost as if the brain turned off its own ability to criticize itself. When it comes to analyzing creativity, the fields of psychoanalysis and neuroscience seem to line up very neatly on top of each other. So, whether you call it your inner critic or malignant lateral prefrontal cortex hyperactivation, I prefer the former. I believe I've made a pretty solid case for why this complex has to go if you want to become a creative genius. Now, how do we do that? Act 3. Free your mind. My last video, The Man in the Arena, was part of a speech I memorized by former American President Teddy Roosevelt. If you haven't seen it yet, check it out now, because it holds the key to triumphing over your own inner critic, and I'm going to be referencing it in this section. If you have seen it, great! Let's continue. Now that we've met the inner critic, discovered its origin story, and learned why it's so harmful, it's time to defeat it once and for all in a gladiator-style battle to the death, metaphorically. Well, that's easier said than done. Not because he's stronger than you, no. It's just because he won't show up. If we want to become more creative, we need to triumph over our inner critic, and this can be done in 2 steps. 1, separating it from ourselves, and 2, deciding we don't respect its opinion. When we are not conscious of this complex's existence and how and why it formed, we simply experience the thoughts of the inner critic as our thoughts, and as such we typically swallow them whole without questioning the value or the accuracy of them. But when we can be aware of why we have this complex and realize that it is no longer necessary to protect us, we can see it as an external voice talking to us, and begin to have a relationship with it as we would a friend, acquaintance, or enemy. So being aware of this complex and seeing it as something external is necessary in order to defeat it, but you might not have been even aware of its existence until now. But it is possible to become more aware of your own thoughts and inner complexes with a practice called mindfulness. Mindfulness is simply being aware of your thoughts without identifying with them, to see your mind from the perspective of an observer. One of the best and simplest practices I use to improve my mindfulness is journaling, where I try to write down all the thoughts that cross my mind. For this type of journaling, where the only point is a stream of consciousness to make my thoughts something I can analyze objectively, I like to use a composition notebook, something that is cheap and has a lot of space to write with, as opposed to a nicer notebook that I might use to chronicle my dreams or my poetry. Another reason journaling can help you become more aware of the inner critic is because journaling is a creative act in and of itself, which tends to summon the critic and get it to go on a rant. For example, I know my inner critic says my fancy journals are too nice for my rambling about my random thoughts, which I kind of agree with, so we compromised. But this one is just so cute. I renamed it Decomposition Notebook. As you write about your thoughts, you will have thoughts about your writing about your thoughts. Write those down too. If you persist in this, you might emerge with a sort of 5-paragraph essay written by none other than your inner critic himself about why you suck and what you're making isn't good enough. Now that we've lured this complex out into the open, it's time for step 2, criticizing our inner critic. The inner critic gets its power from our respect. It thrives when we believe what it has to say is true and worthwhile. But if you watched my last video, The Man in the Arena, you'll know it is not the critic who counts. Your inner critic may get some kind of twisted pride from criticizing your failures, but it is too cowardly to even attempt what you are attempting. The credit truly belongs to the part of you that strives valiantly, who tries to do things and makes mistakes because that's what it means to try. As the saying goes, the master has failed more times than the beginner has tried. That means if the number of your failures, real or imaginary, is the metric you judge yourself by, you can never reach mastery in anything. Unless you learn to devalue your inner critic and revalue your inner man in the arena, to respect the nobility of your own effort, even if it fails, because even if it does, at least you know your place will never be among those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. And more than that, because failure is not the opposite of success. No, failure is a necessary ingredient of success. Because if you're not failing, you're not attempting something difficult enough. And if you are failing, then you are. And I'm proud of you. I hope this video helped you in some way and maybe inspired you to start making stuff, whatever medium you choose. Even if it's something like journaling that you don't share with anyone else, it's so important to take your creative drive out of storage where it might have been since your childhood and shake off all the dust and mothballs to remember how beautiful it really is. Personally, I'm of the humble opinion that curious people make the best art because your ability to carefully observe the world around you can give you insights that creative people like me might not have when we're stuck in our own heads. And also because all the different subjects you've learned about have the opportunity to come together in a way no one has ever synthesized before, if you just have the courage to believe that what you have to say about it matters. And it does matter, even if it only matters to one person. So I want you to know that it matters to me. Love, Mayhem.